Hey everyone, Conrad here. Thank you for listening to the Wellware Podcast. Today I'm here with Ral West. I'm very excited to introduce you guys to Ral because I think you're going to find yourself really impressed by the history and acumen of business knowledge that Ral is bringing to the table. I want to forewarn you that all of this experience and all of the things that we're going to be talking about are expected to be culminated into a type of content that Ral is currently actively promoting, effectively a course of hers. And so I just want you to get a sense up front that a lot of the discussion of what I'm going to be talking about with Ral is going to be to kind of give you a sense of where Ral is coming from, how all her background and experiences allows her to communicate around this business acumen. And as a result, I hope you take something away from our time together. With that being said, Ral, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Conrad. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So Ral, I think we need to start off with the most interesting piece of information that I think I have about you on the surface level, which is you're based in Alaska.
Yes. We live in Sitka, Alaska, which is in Southeast Alaska, closer to Seattle than to Anchorage.
And how long have you been there?
We've been in Sitka over 20 years, believe it or not. And I've been in Alaska well over 40 years.
Yeah. I don't believe it.
Yeah. I came when I was very young, very young.
Yeah. I have never been. I don't know if I ever plan to be, but I'm still just equally impressed. Ral, clearly so much of your time in the world of business has reflected around. Can you do me this favor? Can you share with us a little bit more about, just kind of give us the broad strokes resume of like, where did you start? Where were you in that time? What was the type of industry involved? I would just love to get a sense of like, what's the history of things that you see across so many decades and in business,
Okay.
no less.
Sure. I'll give you the nickel tour because it's a long time. So I was born in Seattle, Washington, and my family was involved in Alaska tourism. They were involved in it before I was born. So growing up, Alaska was my second home. Visited there regularly. Um, we had cruise ships, motor coaches, hotels, you name it, took visitors all over the state of Alaska. In fact, my father was known as the father of Alaska tourism, and they affectionately call him Mr. Alaska. So growing up, I had a great deal of education, if you will, in entrepreneurship and the tourism industry. So obviously, when I entered the working world, it was in the family business, and I stayed in the family business for a number of years. But then in my mid-20s, I decided that I needed to get out from underneath the family shadow, if you will. And I took a job in Ketchikan, Alaska, which is the southernmost city in Alaska. Um, and I was director of marketing for a small tour company there. And yes, it somewhat competed with my family's company, which was interesting. But my father was very supportive, and I appreciated that. After about a year in Ketchikan, it rains 160 inches a year in Ketchikan. I mean, it rains a lot in Seattle. It rains more in Sitka. It rains twice as much in Ketchikan. So I was starting to get, web feet, and I needed to get out of there. So I moved north to Anchorage, which is the largest city in Alaska, and started my own business. And it was a small marketing consulting firm specializing in tourism, of course. My first clients were all tourism businesses that I was helping to get the word out to their potential visitors. One of the things that I did was to represent companies in Hawaii that wanted to sell to Alaskans. It was a form of steady cash flow for me in the early days of my business. And so I had to fly off to Hawaii every once in a while to check out these products. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I had to check out these products that I was representing. And I was in a small little office complex, one of those executive suite things where we shared a receptionist desk, and I had a 88 square foot office, very tiny.
You had a closet.
Yes. And this boy across the hall had his own business, and he was seeing me fly off to Hawaii and going, I like Hawaii. I'd like to go there on business and get free trips to Hawaii. So he started picking my brain. And eventually I said, this is what I do for a living. You're going to have to pay for my services. And he goes, I'll take you out to dinner. So anyway, that first date slash business meeting led to us getting married less than a year later. So he ended up starting a business to sell or represent condo owners who lived in Alaska, had condos in Hawaii, and he would market them and get a commission for every condo that he rented. And I said, well, that's great. But, his background was real estate. I said, that's kind of more this real estate angle. And, let me tell you how the tourism industry works. Well, we ended up running our businesses side by side for many years. But then, not too long after we got married, it was clear that I needed to let my business, be put to bed and devote full-time attention to his. He needed the marketing support, and I supported him with human resources and just overall management and organization. And we ran that business together for 25 years. And that was where I cut my teeth on a lot of the learning experiences, lessons, mistakes, etc., that I now can share with people who want to take my course, which we'll talk about later. But the culmination of that business effort was that we were able to grow the business to the point where we were no longer involved in the day-to-day operation. We had a professional chief operating officer, chief financial officer. They took care of everything. We kept tabs on it from afar. By that time, we had a second home in Maui. We had a yacht. We were enjoying world travels, just having the life that we wanted to have.
Yeah.
And then we were able to sell the company to Alaska Airlines. And that was a lovely exit, gave us the opportunity to retire at that point if we wanted to, but we didn't. So we went on, and I guess because of my connection to small cruise ships in Alaska, we ended up buying several small cruise ships and leasing them out to a company who operated them on cruises in Alaska and Mexico and on the Columbia River. And we did that for several years, almost 10 years, I think. And then we sold the last of the ships during COVID because, as you know, cruise ships were just not operating during COVID. And our last ship was tied up to a dock. And so this was a sign that we needed to pivot to something else again. And at that point, we searched around for the other opportunities. What arenas are there that we could get involved in, and found multifamily syndications. And since then, we've invested in over 6,000 units or doors of apartment buildings that are spread out over 5 states, mostly in the Sunbelt states of the US. So that's the latest segue in our history. And then a little over a year ago, I started this business, Ral West, Living the Dream, because our adult daughters said, Mom, everybody wants to do what you're doing. They want to live the dream. Why don't you just teach them how to do it? You figured this all out. And so well, I'm not sure I really need to start another business at this point in my life, but what the heck? My husband said, well, if it's fun, do it. And it has been fun.
So you're doing it.
I'm doing it.
Ral, thank you for the full storyline. I think that, like, even just for me, I know we've had a chance to chat throughout a couple of different sessions, and yet, getting to hear the full start to finish really gives me just a huge, broad understanding of where you're coming from, what you've been through, what you've dealt with. I understand that, COVID amongst many have had to rethink, what decisions they were going to make from a business standpoint, because there was just this sort of global shutdown. But as most have looked back on, the tourism industry in particular, the travel industry in particular, I'm curious what the real estate network has done, at least with respect to Alaska and Hawaii, within the 2020 years, due to the pandemic. I'm very curious about all of that. But needless to say, wow. So, well, here's sort of my first question. I get that you're inspired to create course content around this entire journey of yours that you've participated in. Can you sort of give an idea to the audience what sort of things you're going to end up talking about as a result of all this experience that you've had?
Yes. The primary learning experiences had to do with how to get out of having your arms, feet, everything involved in the day-to-day operation of the company. Entrepreneurs start off with rose-colored glasses and everything is going to be wonderful and I can live life the way I want to on my terms. And then soon they discover that the business owns them instead of the other way around. And we were in that boat. We were exhausted, out of shape, overweight. I mean, didn't take care of ourselves. We joke about the fact that it's a wonder that we ever conceived 2 daughters because, who has time for that? So we had to figure out how to run this business without the business totally consuming us. And it was just not sustainable for a long period of time. And we were studying with mentors. Our earliest mentor, big name, is Robert Kiyosaki. We started taking courses from him in the late 80s, way before he ever wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And we just ate up everything that he could teach us. And we had lunch with him on the Big Island in Hawaii in like 1994. And he said, you guys need to get these 2 books. And one of them was a book named The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. And it outlined, how an entrepreneur can get out of that day-to-day grind by establishing systems. And I just soaked that up like a sponge. I said, oh my God, this is what we need to do. So we set about implementing those ideas in our business. And it took a while because we had to figure out how to do it. And we didn't know what these systems were. And I was actually in college at the time too. I had dropped out of college earlier in my life. And so I just decided I needed to go back and finish the degree just for my own sake. I didn't need it for any career advancement, but I loved the learning. And I would go to class and come back to the office and say, guess what I learned? And guess what we're going to be doing next? And they were just like, oh no, what
I've
now?
already got so much work to do, Raw. Why are
Yeah,
you doing this to
yeah,
us?
yes, leave us alone. But one of the things was the W. Edwards Deming's Total Quality Management Program, and that was very much along the lines of establishing systems and measurements and, running your business with data. And, so we did that. So it took about 5 years from the time we first started learning about this to the point where we could hire that chief operating officer and chief financial officer. And we had to be ready to say, okay, we've got the systems in place. We have our culture firmly entrenched in the organization. Our team is solid. They know how we run the business. Now we can hand it over to someone and feel secure that they will be running it the way we intended it for it to be run. And because, it's a baby. You don't want to let go of your baby. So we wanted to be sure that our baby was in good hands.
Right. I like that you're almost kind of presenting a hard reality of fact, which is that in this world of pursuing on the business work responsibilities, you have your in the business work responsibilities still. That doesn't change. And part of working on the business is studying on the business in and of itself, right? Understanding the system implementations, understanding the systems themselves. It's almost ironic that we talk about that from a one-on-one basis when there's almost like a precursor to that one-on-one, which is like, just what type of terminology are we working with here? Like, I'm a stranger in a strange land.
Mm-hmm.
I like that you shared that there's a reality of time that is required to just get familiar with everything, such that you can then even understand what you're trying to implement. Then implementation comes. Then the success from that implementation is achieved, and that can take years, right?
It
Depending on
can.
the time frame of what you're accomplishing and how much time you ultimately have in between in the business life, the 2 kids.
Yeah. And don't forget the nonprofit activities too,
Oh, sure.
being on
Why don't we
boards,
add that?
etc. So I think that what's important to note here is that because I went through it myself, And it did take a while. I now have the formulas and the frameworks that I can teach people how to do it in a much shorter period of time.
If
They
they're
won't
so
have,
willing.
yes. Yeah, they have to do some work, right? I can't, I can lead the horse to water. I can't make them drink.
Uh-huh.
So uh, they can take this information and implement it in their business and achieve the results far quicker than I was able to do. In fact, we did this for a friend of ours who was helping us to promote and manage a group of vacation rental condos that we owned in Maui. And we set her up in the business and gave her our URL for the condos, and she went off, got off and running. But pretty soon the business consumed her, and we couldn't even have a dinner with her without her being on the phone and taking bookings and all this stuff. And we're like, no, this isn't going to work for you. You need some systems. And so we kind of nurtured her through that process, and she listened and she implemented our suggestions. And now her business has grown 10 times, and she's now able to take like month-long vacations. So it is so heartening to see that, it works when you listen to what we say, do what we say, and it will work for you.
And I want to dispel a couple of things because obviously, Raul, I mean, my goal and my desire is to promote your coursework. I mean, just
Thank
for
you.
the transparency in the room, my team is actively serving you right now as on a virtual assistant basis to get you speaking engagements. Get your course out there, and yeah, call it a selfish interest in seeing your success because it's ours as well. I'm grateful for the win-win relationship. But again, to dispel some sense of salesmanship here. I feel like I share this conversation with a lot of folks surrounding time and the opportunity cost of, as you've pointed out, investing and figuring these things out for yourselves or committing to the status quo, which sucks, um, and pursuing your particular solution set of knowledge, information, um, and ways of implementing versus any other potential coach or platform or knowledge resource that's out there, right? I mean, you're not the only one who's uncovered this solution set. And while you are yet here and come with a very particular background around success that maybe can be explored for certain individuals who are like, hey, I may just be in the general practice of business, but if I have a particular tourism background, Ra's going to be a particularly interesting mentor for me, right? Her skills and knowledge are going to be particularly insightful for me. The point being, I think I've gotten caught up in a couple of different loops that I'd like to share with you that I think are really interesting to bring up. One is this sort of odd entrepreneurial mindset of, I want to figure it all out by myself. That's one particular one that I get a little bit shocked at in hindsight. The
Mhm.
second one that I get caught up in is, you're telling me I need to invest money that I don't know if I really necessarily have now, right? So now we get into this whole conversation of like, pricing and how much does the offer cost? Like, what does it take to have this information? Right? Like, I know I want to get there faster, but now I'm playing this weird time and money opportunity cost math around like, can I afford to speed things up by getting the information I need? Um, and I think more realistically than that, it's like, not only can I afford to do it, but can I afford to modify my behavior so I can actually implement? That's
Mm.
actually a conversation I don't think that gets had with people because it requires a lot of self-awareness, painful self-awareness. So I would love to get your thoughts on that because I feel like that's something that I imagine you are faced with now. Like, you're in this business where you're trying to serve people who need this type of help, and yet they're probably struggling with their own sort of conflicts around like, how should I, like, do I need this help? Can I get this help? Can I afford this help? And why should I go to Raw?
Exactly. Well, and you're absolutely right, is that there's many, many, many sources for help out there. There's tons. Uh, the point that I think needs to be made, though, is not whether you can afford to do it. It's, can you afford not to? What's the cost in terms of your time, your health, your well-being, and so forth, and just the success of your business if you don't you will use a little story about sharpening the axe. The guy is in the forest chopping down a tree, and somebody comes along and says, "Geez, you're working so hard chopping down this tree." And the guy says, "I know, I know." And he says, "Just wish this axe wasn't so dull." And the guy says, "Well, why don't you stop and sharpen the axe?" He says, "I don't have time to do that. I've got to get this tree
Gotta cut
chopped
this wood.
down."
Yeah.
So, simply, it's like you have to take the time to sharpen your axe. If you don't, the cost is too great. And, we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on this education. You can spend a fraction of that, a tiny bit, like 1,000, and learn all of it. Now, yes, it's going to take some of your time to actually implement it, and you're going to have to be thoughtful and so forth and pull back away from, get out of the day to day a little bit to work on the business. But if you don't, what's the cost? What's the cost in time wasted, in health, in opportunity cost? If you free yourself up to think about some other ways to expand your business, but that you don't have the time to even do that because you're so busy in the day-to-day grind, what's that cost? So I think that it's a point that I'm sure a lot of people worry about, but I think they need to look at it from a different perspective.
And now I'm going to bring you one layer deeper in this sophisticated market of course sales, because I will say every other course out there is saying that exact same thing. But
Oh.
I love the analogy. We're going to work with it. I'm gonna say we're back again in the woods with this axe cutter, with this tree chopper, and in comes the wizened older tree chopper here, and they're kind of offering this advice of like, hey, why don't you sharpen the axe? Um, and let's say in this level of market sophistication, the sort of course denier or the information saying the person who's saying like I don't have the time to sharpen this axe, I'm too busy cutting here. Um, let's say they fail to get they fail to heed the wise words. And so then what happens? Another wise person comes up and says the exact same thing that the last person said, right? And the conversation goes on like this potentially ad infinitum, right? How many times, how many different coaches, how many different course offers and how many times is this type of information, again, given the ad nauseum of what's available, how many times does it take for you to realize like, maybe it is worth putting in a single four-figure sum? And I think that is a fair price, by the way. I mean, granted, there are very different levels in which folks will say, I'm going to offer my course at double digit, triple digit, with subscription models, where you get all these very interesting, ways of saying, I'm going to make this more approachable for you. Raul, can I ask, what is the cost of your course, and how did you go about making sense of that pricing model?
Well, the full retail price is $14.97, but it's being launched for the first time, so there'll be a special like founding member price of $9.97 for the
Okay.
people who get in on the ground floor. So that's a $500 savings.
Okay.
But it's a new product, and as you said, there's lots of competition out there. And the only thing that I can promise is that I'm going to put everything I can into this course so that the value will be realized probably in the first module, if not by the second module. So it's hard to quantify how much people can gain from just getting some of this just simple strategic how to do this in your business. It's not a high level thing. It's presented in a very easily understood and easily digestible bite-sized pieces. Here's what you do. And it's not just about systems. It's about taking a look at how your business is structured. What does your team look like? How are you empowering your team? What's your corporate culture? How do you make sure that your customer service is being delivered in a world-class manner? And how are you leveraging yourself? All of these things are so integral to the success of a business. So really what I want is to help entrepreneurs achieve the best possible success and achieve a life that they can actually enjoy. I mean, that's what it's all about. And I totally believe in my heart that people are capable of running a business and having a life that they love.
I have one last speculative buyer question for you, Raul, and then I want to switch topics a little bit. Um, is there any way, and I've been asking this question a lot amongst folks within a sales operation conversation thread. So this is my particular inspiration for this question. Um, is there any way in which a consumer of your content has the ability to de-risk? They have some sort of guarantee in case things aren't working out for them with respect to their consumption of your content. What does that look like?
Well, there'll be a refund period, 100% refund offered within the first 30 days. So there's that. So if they get into it and they go, oh, I just can't do this, they'll get their money back. So there's that. But there'll be ongoing support for people who take the course too. I mean, it's not going to be just, listen to these lessons and do these worksheets. There'll be like, question and answer sessions and group coaching that will be offered to people, particularly those who are in the founding member group.
All right, fair enough. Sounds like it should be a no-brainer if you are dealing with these problems and you'd like a do-it-yourself solution. And here's where I want to suffice. If you give me 1 second, Rob, please. I'm going to just have to edit that little component out. Forgive me. The two worlds having conversations that are both quite loud. Raul, pardon, I'm going to have to pick up my train of thought really quickly. De-risk. People get a chance 30 days. No brainer. All right. I guess in this case, I will suffice to say that, albeit some personal life distractions, Raul, I really appreciate the fact that you've decided to instill this awareness in others surrounding what it would take for them to transform their life and business so that it's a more meaningful balance, so that it's something that can actually grow and scale. Because I think at the end of the day, a lot of operators of their own companies find themselves in this sort of, you said it earlier, it's sort of like this interesting ego of like, I got to do everything myself. And yet, even the most super egos, even the biggest of egos will find themselves faced with the limitations of time. I like that the price point is, if I could compare it to, let's say, what you would see out of hiring an operations agency like Well-Aware's, in which if you had to go through someone else's means to help you implement these systems and processes, you're going to pay a four-figure sum that's actually much higher than a course like this. And as a result, you're going to find yourself potentially more challenged. Yes, you'll buy back the time even more directly by not having to take on this operation of putting together systems yourself. Perhaps you forego the ability to learn these things and study them more inherently. It all depends on your ability to trade money and time ultimately, and sort of how long of a horizon I imagine you're looking at. But again, these are all things that I think you should think about when you're deciding, where am I at in my particular state of business, and what do I need right now in order to move forward into the next phase?
I think that as people go through the course, if that's what they decide to do, part of the content is figuring out where you need the leverage. And in some cases, it might be to hire a firm to help you do the implementation, depending on what your resources are and the size of your business. And you may need VAs to help you spread that work around, like I have done. So I think that there's a definite complementary aspect to what you offer and what I offer, because I'm not going to do it for you. And so I'll just be, laying out that here's what needs to be done. And here's all these resources that can help you with that implementation.
I did not plan to sell myself during this time block.
But why not?
But why not? Raul, one final question. Right now, given all that you've experienced in the realm of entrepreneurship, given all that you've experienced in life outside of business as well, what's the one thing you think people need to be most aware of these days?
I think it is that you have to commit to continual learning. The world is not standing still. And no matter what your age, there's more things that are coming day by day that you need to stay on top of. So commit to a continuous program of learning. Get mentors take courses, read books, do whatever you can to stay current because times are always changing. And it seems like they're changing at an exponentially, faster rate. And, we've made several pivots in our career, and that's because we were noticing what's going on in the world around us. One of the reasons we sold to Alaska Airlines is because we knew that they were going to come into the Alaska Hawaii market. We were operating wide body charter jet service between Alaska and Hawaii. Well, we would be competing head to head with Alaska Airlines. Whose pockets are deeper, ours or Alaska Airlines? So we made the very wise decision to go to them and say, we think it would be cheaper for you to buy us than to try to win the market, because we had solidly entrenched ourselves in that market and had a lot of loyalty. So they made a very smart move by buying us instead of trying to duke it out with fare wars. So, these are things that are happening all around you. And if you're in the little tunnel vision thing and keeping your eyes just on the chopping down that tree trunk, you're never going to see it. And you need to be aware that you need to make changes. You need to learn what the new things are and keep up.
Well, thank you so much for our time today.
Thank you, Conrad. It's been fun.